Good afternoon, everybody. We are still sorting out some technical issues from our colleagues from Help a Child in Burundi. But welcome to everybody who's here online. Very glad to see you here. So please just allow us a few minutes to connect with Clément and Michel of Help a Child in Burundi, because we wanted to start with a Mentimeter, which they have developed. So please hang on.
I think we are fine. Can anyone hear us? I think yours is better. Put it on.
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. Good.
Great, then let's get us started. I think you wanted to start with a short round to understand who's in the room. So Michel, over to you to run the Mentimeter. And welcome once again, everybody.
You need to run the Mentimeter.
Share the link in the
Yeah. So we have shared the link on the chat, so the participant can actually click there and respond to the question. Michelle, did you share it?
Okay, can I share the screen?
Yeah.
Can I share the screen?
You can.
So that they can see the code for those who can't.
Yes, please do so. And there's nothing in the chat yet.
Okay, let me try to share my screen then.
Yes, please. Thanks.
Let me know if you can see it.
There's nothing on the chat, huh?
Can you see it?
I think Erwin has shared the link, huh?
Hi, Michelle. Yeah, you sent it to me individually, I think. So I've shared it with everyone now. It should be there in the chat.
You did send it in. Okay. Good. So. Can you see that?
All right, maybe while everyone is filling in the Mentimeter, maybe I should also give a little bit of an introduction to what we're going to listen to today. So my name is Erin Kuipers. I'm a policy officer with the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I'm also the ARC coordinator at the Department of Stabilization and Humanitarian Aid, or DSH. So during this session, we will listen to two ARC consortia. who have been part of the ARC Fund, who will share their experiences and their practical lessons from their work with peace committees in South Sudan and in Burundi. I see not many familiar names, so I think it's good to give a little bit of a quick overview of the ARC program, the ambitions behind it, and some reflections. So the ARC Fund is a centrally managed tender program launched in 2016 by DSH. It is a large multi-country program with 21 consortia working in 12 fragile and conflict-affected countries. And it is also a multi-thematic program focusing on 4 themes: human security, access to justice, economic reconstruction, and of course, peace building. However, what links everything together is the overarching goal, which is to address the root causes of conflicts, instability, and irregular migration. So quite an ambitious goal. Addressing root causes has been a long-standing priority of the MFA, and one of the intervention types that we support is the peace committee model. Supporting peace committees has been part of our programming already within the reconstruction tender, which was the predecessor of the ARC Fund. And also under the ARC program, we support 5 projects who have incorporated local peace building committees as their main vehicle for addressing root causes of conflict. So 2 of which you'll hear more from today. The idea behind the peace committee model is that facilitating dialogue is a first step towards rebuilding trust and reconciliation at the local level, and that dialogue at community level can even facilitate conflict transformation at grassroots level. Of course, we also recognize the limitations of this model. Our internal evaluation department, IOB, was quite critical of the peace committee model in the past, stating that without outside support, peace committees had little leverage to address higher conflict issues or even have a limited political role to play at a higher scale. So the ambition of the ARC Fund, as set out in 2016, was to focus on addressing root causes from the bottom up, but also aligning activities at the local level with these national level dynamics, and so generate a catalyzing or trickle-up effect, affecting longer-term and countrywide processes. So now, 5 years later, the ARC projects have been finalized, and we're able to draw lessons. And again, we see that overall, the ARC model is quite limited in influencing root causes of conflict at society-wide level. This was also confirmed by the midterm review that we conducted. However, at the same time, our consortia have consistently reported that peace committees are actually quite effective at the bottom-up level in generating change towards better social cohesion. And they, even though maybe not at the required or envisioned scale of as was the ambition through ARC, we do see positive contributions generated with regards to peace at local level. So that means there are many lessons to be learned from the ARC program. DSH has recently published our new policy theory of change, in which the concept of the social contract is really central to our policy and programming. And it's also a concept that for us puts local context central to our analysis. So in our new theory of change, we've tried to incorporate lessons that we've learned from previous programming and the ARC program as well. We've tried to really put our renewed emphasis at a holistic view on peace building, not only focusing on peace processes and peace mechanisms, but also really a comprehensive look at peace building from local to national level, and making that connection. We also have incorporated a lesson from the midterm review, which is to really have this embedding of local peace building initiatives in and linking them to national policy and frameworks, and underlying the need for a really complementary approach at these different levels of interventions. At the same time, we also have a lot of questions, learning questions. So how do we view the social contract and social cohesion with regards to fragile states, realizing that this is very context dependent. And how do we value local peace building efforts with regard to the wider social contract? Specifically, the ARC program has presented us with the dilemma of wanting to have impact at a countrywide level versus the limited scale of interventions at a local level. So might have local impact, but not necessarily a society-wide impact or not measurable. So as our new theory of change continues this ambition of wanting to influence root causes of conflict, we are presented with the same dilemma of ambition versus capacity. We are presented with questions. So how should the ministry and its programmatic partners deal with this dilemma? And how can we still ensure that local peace-building efforts are connected or even inform national conflict prevention and peace-building? So one of the critiques of that was generated from the ARC midterm review, and most relevant for today, in my opinion, is that the ARC results framework did not sufficiently capture results at project level. And for me, this highlights also the relevance of the experiences and practical lessons which will be shared by CARE and Help a Child today. So I invite you to first listen to Cornelia de Winter, who will present lessons from the ARC project by CARE in South Sudan, and then listen to Clément and Kouisi from Help a Child, who will share insights from the project in Burundi. So Cornelia, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Erin, for this very interesting introduction. And welcome once again to the audience. I'm really glad to see so many people have joined this session. Thank you very much for your interest. And I'm really excited to speak today to you about a topic which is very close to my heart, peace building initiatives at community level and specifically for South Sudan. So let's dive straight into the object. I think we can proceed to the next slide, please, Liliana. Because I would like to present the agenda for today. So I will start with giving just a very quick overview of the ARC program, then talk about how the peace committees in South Sudan, with whom we've worked for a long period of time, how they perceive their own role in their communities and their own words. Then I will provide a quick overview of what are the drivers of successes and challenges internally and externally to allow for effectively functioning peace committees. And I will conclude with recommendations to INGOs, for practitioners who are interested in supporting community-based structures such as the peace committees. Next slide, please. So what was the ARC program? As Erin already said, there is this ARC addressing root causes of conflict facility at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs level. It was launched back in 2015 and led to, I think, more than 18 projects being implemented in 9 countries. And CARE was working together with our consortium partner HTC in South Sudan. So it was a 6-year project nearly, which built very much on earlier work that we had done, also with support from the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the same region. So we didn't come from nowhere, we really started there building on what we had done in earlier years. The target groups for the ARC program in South Sudan are communities which are affected by prolonged conflicts. And those who are familiar a little bit with the context of South Sudan will not be surprised to hear that these were communities which are affected by cattle raiding, child abductions, communal fights, and revenge killings. Next slide, please. So the overall objective of our program was to enhance the resilience of communities to shocks, to both economic shocks and to conflict-related shocks, by working through 3 interconnected program areas: peaceful conflict resolution, economic resilience, and social cohesion. And within the peaceful conflict resolution objective, in which we will zoom in today, the specific outcome objective was to build and sustain mechanisms which help to resolve and mitigate conflicts and to reconcile past grievances peacefully. And our key approach to do this was working with peace committees. Next slide, please. So towards the end of the ARC program, CARE commissioned a study to look very closely into the role of peace communities in supporting social cohesion. So the intention was also to understand the linkage from the outcome area of peace building towards social cohesion in a deeper manner. How did we proceed? It was a remote study basically, but interviews were held locally with key persons involved. And these are of course the peace committee members themselves, local community leaders, police, judiciary, and CARE staff members. And the idea of the study was to understand in more detail, in more depth, the drivers of success for the peace committees, also the challenges that they're encountering, in order to come up with practical recommendations for practitioners. Next slide, please. So one of the questions of the study was also to ask the peace committee members to explain how they see their roles in the communities. And basically they described three distinct roles. The peace committee members described themselves as the first resource persons to peacefully address and resolve concerns at community level. They see themselves as having a complementary role with regard to other structures and mechanisms, both at the customary side, so speaking about traditional chiefs, but also at the state side. So for example, at the Peace Commission, which we have functioning in South Sudan at the state level, and also police and judiciary. Within this broader definition, they have three distinct roles. So first, the creation of awareness in the community, creating awareness about peaceful coexistence, monitoring also what happens in regards to peace developments or conflict developments, of course, and engaging in activities to observe, to support, to sensitize respectful behaviors. For example, queuing at water points, which is a place where we often see small conflicts erupting, which can later on escalate. A second role would be the role to act as a third party and as a mediator to both sides of the conflict. So really providing a kind of a neutral space where both sides can meet to talk, to understand their different perspectives, and to provide a forum for these parties to voice their grievances, their concerns, and identify what peace means to them and this really specific conflict issue at hand, what is required to move forward. The third role would be to act as a bridge between the different actors. So this would mean both the government, judiciary, police, and humanitarian organizations, and intervening during these parties for conflict resolution and acting as an interlocutor. Next slide, please. So I will now look at the peace committees from the internal side. So what kind of internal drivers, what are the internal factors which contribute to the functioning, to the dynamics of an effective peace committee? So basically we identified 5 major drivers of success. First of all, the peace committees are successful because of the role that they have in really providing the space for collaboration with all the other stakeholders to peace. In the South Sudan context, these are the Peace Commission, the police, state judiciary, line ministries, but also the traditional and the community side of actors. Second, they have a role with regard to working also on income generating activities. This was the link with our first outcome area of resilience, because what we see that working also from the peace committees, whose members also sometimes overlapped with other social groups at the community level, in particular the village savings and loan groups, that they together work on kind of income generating activities that support that basic economic needs can be met, and which also provided a kind of an incentive to meet members outside of their community, so generating linkages and relations which are useful for conflict resolution. A third driver of success is women's inclusion, and this is not a given in many contexts, also not in South Sudan. And we felt that whenever women were participating, peace committees are more representative, and the women can also better bring issues related to other women to the foreground. Then collectivism, which means that a collective spirit was created by being part of the peace committees, which also kind of was manifested by organizing certain activities together and also pooling funds to support other members in their community. Of course, there are also shortcomings and risks with regard to internal factors. What we saw, that there are sometimes unfeasible expectations from the members for external support. For example, their expectations in terms of salaries or remunerations for participation. There's always a need expressed for a meeting space or even office space, which we cannot fulfill in the given circumstances. The second point is related to that. The funding is relying on time-bound projects such as ARC. What does funding mean in this context? Of course, we are not funding the peace committees as such, but projects such as ARC have been funding staff members of partner organizations who provide this kind of facilitation which is needed to have social groups convening regularly and effectively. Thirdly, we ran into the challenge also of poor community interaction. This was also sometimes difficult to bring them all together to share experiences because of issues related to insecurity, to a lack of infrastructure. South Sudan has a very poor road network and is flooded for several months of the year, making it really difficult to visit other communities. Then we have the issue of information gaps, inaccurate information shared amongst members. South Sudan is a very oral society, so there are no files or records or notes of meetings or of conflicts that occurred. This also proved a challenge. And finally, the lack of a safe space to conduct the meetings. Meetings literally take place under the tree. There's no privacy. Half of the community wants to participate and listen in, which is somehow affecting the effective functioning of the peace committees. Next slide, please. Looking at the external side, what we felt really helped peace committees to function effectively and to contribute to social cohesion was that there was such a thing as an enabling policy environment. And this is perhaps a little bit weird to apply this to the case of South Sudan, but what it means is that basically that there is in general support for peace, for reconciliation. There's no objection as such against the topic. Another driver of success was also the availability of humanitarian support and when basic needs are met. Those who know South Sudan will know that it's a country where humanitarian needs are prevalent. This is a country where 9 million people are depending on humanitarian support, where large parts of the populations that we work with are in protracted food insecurity situations. And in those cases where we were able also to match the work that we've been doing with humanitarian support, we also saw a greater effectiveness of the peace committees, because simply it's difficult to participate in a meeting when you have hungry kids at home. Then about the point of institutional support, obviously it helped greatly for the effective functioning of peace committees if there is institutional support from INGOs who can provide tailored meetings, who can provide kind of incentives in the terms of providing knowledge, having a convening function to make them work in the most effective manner. And then finally, accessibility to infrastructure in terms of meeting spaces and roads also helps, because it facilitates exchange visits to neighboring communities with whom there are issues to be resolved. On the challenge side, there are again plenty. Again, we have the displacement context in South Sudan, 2 million IDPs in South Sudan, overcrowding when populations have to move, infection outbreaks. Of course, they were also affected by the pandemic. Due to the flooding that is occurring in South Sudan for several months a year, we also see displacement. People have to, their populations are disrupted. They have to move to other places, which doesn't make easy for committees to be maintained. The insecurity challenge, this is of course also an obvious one. In practice, this meant issues with regard to activity implementation. Peace committee members were not able to move freely out of concerns for their safety. And the lack of mobility aspect I already mentioned. Next slide, please. So in this context, what are the lessons for practitioners, for NGOs who want to work with peace committees in a meaningful manner and also in a manner to ensure that they remain sustainable? One of our biggest learnings was really that it's important to promote peace committee diversity from the beginning on. Peace committees are not something new in the context of South Sudan. Basically, these are traditional conflict resolution mechanisms which have been fractured because of the conflict impact. And all we basically did was to support that they can again gather and function effectively. However, in the original setup, these peace committees are often not very diverse. So what we facilitated was that there's also the participation of youth members, of IDPs, of women, of returnees. There are also interesting developments with the returnees coming from other countries who also can support very meaningfully to peace committees. And why do we do this? Because we learned really that the more diverse the members are in terms of background, ages and roles, the more effective they are. Second point about gender inclusive, this really requires a conscious effort to have women participating, first of all, to be there physically, but also to speak out and to influence the decisions of the peace committees. This is very relevant in South Sudan, also because of the high prevalence of household level conflicts with regard to gender-based violence. Third learning is about facilitating opportunities for inter-committee engagement. So really exchange visits, joint trainings and dialogue sessions, whatever provides for some kind of rather basic exposure just to the other side, to the other communities, was found to be tremendously useful and effective. Then involving youth in peace programming, I think there are, where everybody agrees there are very often rather negative stereotypes with regard to youth in fragile settings. They are often seen as like the propagators of violence and the like, and this is also similar in South Sudan. We have worked specifically with youth, not only for their inclusion in peace committees, but we also set up specific youth peace committees. For example, in the cattle camps, which the cattle camps have a big role with regard to the cattle raiding and the child abductions, which is one of the most important conflict factors in South Sudan. So we worked with these cattle camp youth and also which age groups in Pibor to address the specific dynamics related to youth. Then supporting income generating activities. Again, this is a food insecure context, a protracted context of food insecurity. And there's an evident link between a lack of livelihoods and conflict. So whatever we can do in these kind of resource deprived and fragile settings to support income generating activities really helps, because it directly removes root causes of conflicts and also helps to establish trade links between communities which has been lost in the course of the conflict. And these trade links, they help again to kind of generate this mutual understanding, also based on mutual economic interests. Another recommendation is about providing ongoing capacity development and diversified training. the peace committees are being trained a lot by very different actors. And it's really important to come up with tailored training. So always invest in a training needs assessment to ensure that you're doing the right thing. I also have a seventh recommendation on my speaker's notes. It's not mentioned here, but I would like to mention it anyway. And this is that there is a resource gap of communities, and this is of the peace committees. And this is simply related also to the specific context of South Sudan. This is the end of my presentation so far. Back to you, Erin.
All right, thank you so much, Cornelia. In that case, I would like to invite Clément to share his lessons from the ARC project in Burundi.
Clément, you're muted.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear
I
you.
just want someone to tell me if they hear me. So you can hear me, Erin, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Let me just.
Clément, can you hear us?
Okay, good. Thank you so much. So my name is Clément, and I'm the country director for Help a Child Burundi. We also one of the consortium that took part in the ARC program. And I'm here to really just connect to the presentation from South Sudan and the lessons learned from South Sudan. Even though the context are different, but also similar to some extent, because Burundi also is, more of a post-conflict country. And so let me just really take you through the Building Bridges program in Burundi and how we try to restore the broken social contract in Burundi. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So in Burundi, the context is a bit different from South Sudan, and we came at the time where the BBB came at the time where we were just soon after the post-2015 elections, a lot of unrest, a lot of conflict within the community and in the country. And at that time, and before, if you know the history of Burundi, it's really kind of a recurrent conflict that really passed on from generation to generation. And we then designed the BBB to try and address 4 drivers of conflict and instability. The big one is poverty, and Burundi is one of the 5 poorest countries in the world. So the resources are very scarce, and there's always this conflict on resources. Of course, there's a lack of social cohesion. We have had so many ethnic conflicts in the past. There's issues of mistrust among the communities that are being carried on from generation to generation. Also, I think Burundi is also one of the really poor and very corrupt country in the world. There's really absence of social contract. There's no political will to try and address the issue. Also, you will understand there's a lack of partial conflict resolution. In Burundi, many times we have had an issue of having a very good justice system, There's a really low awareness on the justice processes, and the community try to really find a way to reconcile themselves. So corruption, like last year when we were in, the same conference, we presented on the issue of really poor justice system in Burundi, where you could have a meal with a judge in a restaurant and then tomorrow you win a case in the court. Then why BBB? Why did you have to work in the context of Burundi, especially after the 20, sorry, next slide, please. Good. So then why Burundi at that time? Because as I said, the call for proposal from MFA just came at a time where we needed to address this kind of issues and root cause of conflict in Burundi. There is, within the communities where we are, lack of accountability. There was also this weak capacity, for the communities to effectively express or defend their right. Burundi is one of the few countries where with the development of a regime that is really so strict, there's this shrinking civil space in Burundi. I just want to refer to as the Rule of Law Index 2021 show that in the last few years, there were so many countries that have become, the civic space has been shrinking, and the Burundi is among them. And then this brings issues of there's no level of accountability. The local authorities, the government can do whatever they want because the civil society is becoming weaker and weaker and weaker. And on the other side, the government is becoming more powerful and too controlling. Then we have the real issue of no tangible liabilities. For example, young people or the community does not want to participate in any community-led peace building because they feel like their voice are not going to be heard, and the majority of the youth actually take time more to really fight for their socio-economic resilience. So to participate in the social cohesion activity in the community is not their priority. So then you've got this not active participation of the community in the day running, the daily running of accountability mechanism within the community. Please, can we have the next slide? Just quickly before I forget. So the BPB program was implemented by these 4 international organizations. I would like to recognize the American Friendship Committee, Code from UK, and the Maintenance Emisi, which is a Dutch organization, and this was supported by MOFA. We targeted 18,000 young people, direct beneficiaries within the communities. We were in 15 communities of Burundi. It's highlighted in orange. That's where we were, in 6 provinces. Please, can we go on the next slide? And the program ran between 2016 to 2021. Next slide. Good. So at this point in time, I would like really to connect it to what my colleagues from KPAC Nederland was talking about South Sudan. For us, we see the similarities within the 2 programs and some of the achievement. For instance, they worked with peace committees, and in Burundi, we had also some different structures. And the structure that for us was very key was the local committee for good governance. The next slide, I spoke a lot about what they've done exactly. We realized that social stability for young people was strengthened through some good relationships. We had to look at improving because Burundi, we have different ethnic groups. We have also youth from different political parties. So the program had to bring these youth from this different background to try and do dialogue, look at, to work towards the common good. Then one of them was really to focus on conflict resolution, among them and within the communities. We also need to look at how we can support the socioeconomic resilience. And I know Noreen spoke really about the ACT program in general did not really address at the bigger, at the broader level. I'm going to talk about that challenge as well. But we realize at the community level, at least the social cohesion was built. For example, in Burundi, the youth that we supported, they were put into self-help group. Some other people talk about VSLA. And through this, they had to work towards their common goal on, how to improve their socioeconomic resilience. And then we put them in smaller groups where they had to borrow and lend each other money, working towards some income generating activities. And from there, our aim was really to focus first on a very immediate need of these youth. You understand, when you live in a poor country, one of the top poorest country in the world, where the majority of your colleagues or friends, they've left the country or they've joined some rebellion somewhere, and where you wake up, there is no future for you. The first thing that you need to hear is if they can address those immediate needs. So in this case, we had to focus more on economic resilience. When we brought them together to work on this common common goal of improving the economic resilience, and we start seeing some result on social cohesion. It started to unfold where they had to talk about reconciliation, where they had to discuss issues that affect them. I remember during the 2020 elections, in one of the communities, the local authorities has actually thanked us for addressing this issue, because many youth who were there, they worked together to really forget about their political affiliations and they connect to their only economic needs of what they are working towards. So that was good for us. Also, this have to work towards a common goal, that is improving your socioeconomic status. You're likely to really, unite with the people close to you. Can we go to the next slide, please? Let me then focus more on next slide. Focus more on the outcome 3 of the BBP program, which was on a good governance. And this, the good governance was really, really very key for us, because as I said earlier, there was a lack of accountability, top-down accountability. And in this case, we had to really focus on how can leaders really, can be held accountable by the communities and who were, particularly youth. So we created this structure called the Local Committee for Good Governance, LCGGs. And their role was really to improve dialogue between the population and the local community and the local authorities about the community concern. You understand, as I said, there was a really not active participation of young people, the community, in the saying of the community concerns. So we had to really make sure that the local committee for good governance bring actually these dialogues. They had to really raise more awareness about the decision-making processes at local level. Also, this local committee for good governance, they have to monitor and advocate for community needs and activities, and also to advocate for good governance. For example, in Burundi, when we were doing the BBP program, it was a time that the country had to go through the process of developing the local community development, which is known in French PCDC. What we are so happy about is that this local committee for good governance, they had to mobilize the communities to ensure that their voices are heard through those local, the local development plans. So they raised more awareness on that. They participated as a technical team to really support the development of these local development plans. At least the BBP program sponsored 2 of the 15 communes. So this is also, you can see it improved the participation of communities and young people into accountability measures, and also this community development and this communal development plan. Then we saw that at the community level, this they promoted transparency to some extent, and mutual trust between the administration and the communities. In my example, I always like to say, in one of the commune, for the first time in Burundi, the budget of the commune was published in the board on the commune, and this was really because of what these committees did. However, we did not see the report back of the budget. So the budget is published there for years, but we don't see actually the report. And the next move was really to push the administrator to now publish the financial report of the commune. Next slide, please. I'm going to finish soon. Next slide. So, as my colleagues from CARE talked about, there are so many challenges that we encountered in Burundi, as also they encountered in South Sudan, and also across the whole HAC program. I think there were so many challenges, as Irene has alluded to. And the first one for us, we worked in a situation whereby there was a shrinking civil space in Burundi. As I said earlier, we came in the 2015 situation. The government became so controlling. Remember, actually in 2018, all the international organizations in Burundi were suspended by the government, and then you had to submit 4 different documents that was really actually infringing on human rights. For you to reopen. This was really a big challenge for so many organizations, and I think there were some few organizations that decided to leave Burundi because also the local committee for good governance were dealing with very sensitive issue. Human rights in Burundi is a very sensitive issue, and then they became as the opponent or the local authority. So there was this conflict. But what we did, we started to work on the softer issues like marital conflict, land conflict, and other things. And then when there was a trust between the local authorities and the local committee for good governance, we had then to address very core issues such as budget and other human rights issues. But also we realized that the entire program did not have a really strategic direction to address issues on a national level, because we were so much really in the community, rooted in the community, and I think sometimes we were supposed to link to national level. So we did not have really a strategy to address this social contract at governmental level. And also the downwards accountability was not always easy, and it was not always realized. I mean, as I said, for example, it's not every community that published the local budget, or vice versa. So our young people, our committees were good if they reinforce, for example, the tax collection, anything that promote government way of shrinking, controlling the IGO sector, the civic space, and yet then those young people were quite actually the good kid. But then if they really bring issues that are really trying to show accountability, like on core issues, then they become like the opponent. So there's always this fight, the conflict that we used to observe between the local authorities and our community structures that we have built in the community. And as I said, also then our community structures became like the opponent of the local authorities. Can we go to my last slide, please? So to conclude, I'm presenting you the same slide that my colleague from CARE presented. And these are some of the similarities that we saw from both sides. The driver of success of our program was the collaboration with the, between actors within the communities. The income generating activities were more popular and they were more good, and we're so grateful that our youth, during the elections, they focused more on generating their income rather than being manipulated by the politicians. We also saw some women inclusion. were in there to represent, to represent the interests of young people. So one of the big success of our program was during the elections, the local elections. Some of our young, some of the young women were actually elected at the community level, and this was really because the population saw that they're involved in the BBB program, and they were actually they become the voices of the voiceless. Collectiveness is very, important. When people work together, they try to achieve a common goal. The program really developed agriculture skills, peace building skills to so many people who were involved. Challenges also that we faced, we were really a lot of unrealistic expectations of members from external support. So young people were in our program, they were viewed as a very good more, they were actually attracted and attractive to other young people, but we couldn't really reach everyone else. We talk about funding was really so this is the 5-year program is good, but now we are looking at the extension of that, and we need to see how we can consolidate peace in those communities where we worked. But we also has a poor inter-community interaction. If you know, Burundi is divided into this commune, and so we were working in the same, in one commune, and they did not really interact with the next neighboring commune or the other commune to share experiences, something like that. Information gaps or inaccurate information shared among members. Sometimes young people try to give themselves information, and we find ourselves like every time our committees, our structures had to reinforce, proper use of good information. Again, the civic space was a big problem in Burundi. To have meetings or for us to go to the field, we had to have a government official accompanying us to hear what we are saying, to really follow. It was very, very, very complicated, especially if we have a visitor from international community. We have to apply to get a permission for that visitor to go, and then they sent us with a local authority to hear what we are discussing. So this whole shrinking civic space was not. It was really difficult to work during that time on that condition. I would like to thank you so much, and then I'll pass on to Erin to continue.
Yes, thank you so much, Clément, and thank you, Cornelia, as well, again, for sharing these valuable lessons. We'll now go into a plenary session of Q&A. Michelle has already invited you to put your questions in the chat, and I will repeat the invitation. In the meantime, we've already received some questions, so I'll start with the first one to you both, and one which I'm also quite curious about, and that is, what was, you've mentioned a couple of drivers for success. What has been the most sustainable way to integrate these community-based structures and have benefits for social cohesion? I give the questions to you both, and Cornelia, maybe you'd like to start.
Yes, I can give a go at it. So this most sustainable way of working with peace committees. So I will only speak to my experience related to the South Sudan context. And perhaps it's also important to mention here that I was involved in this program merely from a head office perspective. So it was implemented by the colleagues at the country office of CARE South Sudan and HTC. So I'm a little bit remote. Having said that, on basis of my experience and exposure to the program, I think what we really see missing in the South Sudan context is this kind of state level structure. And of course, we have at state level, we do have the State Peace and Reconciliation Commission. However, this institution, while it is mandated to support also peace committees and also the customary courts, is severely underfunded. They don't have adequate premises, they don't have means for transport, they are understaffed and everything. So what we have been trying to do is to kind of establish the links between the peace committees and with this state level Peace and Reconciliation Commission. So the staff of that state level commission has participated in similar trainings as we also ran them for the peace committees and also for the state level actors, so meaning the police and the judiciary. So they had the same exposure, they were in the same space, they dialogued about it. And what was found in our midterm evaluation, dating already back to 2019, is that the peace committees asserted that they are receiving now more support from that state level institution than before the program. So I think this is an indicator of potential sustainability. Then we are, of course, building very much on existing structures. We are not like setting up peace committees as such. These are structures which have been there always. It's a traditional means of conflict resolution. So they are like this primary means of recourse for all kind of conflicts for which other institutions are too far away. So what we've been doing is to focus very much on making them more inclusive, but they are as such legitimate institutions, and there is this community ownership which also contributes to sustainability. Clément, over to you for your perspective regarding Burundi.
I was muted as well. Clément, I think you're muted again. I can see he has lots to share, but we unfortunately cannot hear it yet.
I was muted. Oh, okay, so I was saying there is similarities on the approach that the program South Sudan did. We also did not really, to some extent, create new structures. For example, the local committee for good governance were already affiliated to the Catholic Church, which was a bigger part of our program that was run by, so this part of the project was coordinated by the Department through the CGP, which is a peace and commission for the Catholic Church. So this was important to really reinforce the existing structures already from the Catholic Church. And then we had to teach them different methods of the program. What we did also, we had then to, in the last few years of the program, we spoke to the local authority. We really did a lot of advocacy, and in our exit plan, we had to leave them as a community structure. And in some extent, to some communities, they've been accepted as a part of the community structure. And I remember in one of the provinces, the governor said, now I know in that particular commune, you have the mediators, you have the Committee for Good Governance. I will reach them, we will reach them, reach out to them in terms of support to address many issues of conflict within the communities. Also, we designed a handbook for how to create these peace committees, the local committee for good governance, and then we left them. We trained the community, the local communities, in the use of such a booklet. And also, we had numbers there where they could actually call who they can call to, to try and seek support. And it's our hope that such a practice will continue even beyond the program. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I have two follow-up questions. The first one is from Nicole, and I think Cornelia, you mentioned persuading the local authorities to participate. What lessons can you share on how to involve them and successfully have them participate in the processes?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. And I have to admit that this was also a major headache for us, working on social accountability in general in these very fragile contexts. So our main approach, I think, is first of all, CARE is very much a community-focused organization. We are not an advocacy organization as such. We are very much known for our community development work, also very much with regard to food security, primary needs, and the like. And this kind of groundwork has really enabled us to have built a connection of trust with local authorities in many of these contexts. They know us as an organization who delivers also on a very practical level. So I think having worked from this basis of trust, which has been developed in some cases over decennia in Jonglei, our programming started 15 years ago. And this is why this is something that we can simply build on even as we move forward on these more sensitive topics. So having said that, what we did, we used a tool, a CARE approach called the community scorecard, which is basically a step-by-step process, which is facilitating dialogue sessions between the duty bearers and the rights holders with regard to a certain topic. We chose a topic in the context of South Sudan, which is relevant but not too controversial, being gender-based violence and the role of security providers such as the police in particular. And there was agreement in general that this would be a relevant topic. It was not touching on certain things which might be considered too sensitive in the context. And there was, on basis of this established trust and agreement, to work on improving accountability with regard to gender-based violence. So what we did, just briefly, is to set together with the community and with the duty bearers to establish indicators like how would a successful implementation of gender-based violence protection services look like. And then we facilitated this dialogue, and this is how we kind of brought them on board. Thank you for the question.
My bad. Sorry, I was also muted. I was going to say thank you, Cornelia, for providing that answer. And I have another follow-up question, and that's to you both. And it's from Alexandra. Do you think the positive results on improved accountability are structurally incorporated beyond the project and also beyond the currently elected authorities? And what is your take on your experiences from both our projects? Clément, I'll invite you first to share your insights. Oh, Clément seems to be muted again, I think.
Yeah,
yep.
I'm muted.
We can hear you.
Yeah, it's a very complicated question. It's a very complicated question. So in Burundi, it's for example, the big issue that we have is the circle of community, local authorities and the local administration. For example, we came in 2016, soon after the election. So there were new elected leaders who we actually introduced to communal law. We trained them. Then the program was exiting at the time where 2020, there was a new wave of local authorities. And I remember we had a problem. We had almost start over to really train these new, because some were elected, some were not elected. So in one area where they were not elected, there was not what you call a handover between the the local authorities on the program itself and on what we have achieved so far. So we had to restart again and try to train the new local authorities on the project first, on the law and something like that. So sustainability in that case, if the local authorities are gone and there is no proper handover, it's not sustainable. Yeah. Please, yeah.
Thank you, Clément. Cornelia, I invite you to share your insights.
Yes, thanks again. And again, really a difficult question. I don't even know how the commune administration system works at South Sudan. Apologies for this gap from my side. I think speaking in general about improved accountability and sustainability of this concept within the local administration structures, what struck me again and again whenever I visited South Sudan was really that exposure is so important. So we have exposed through the ARC program very many of government officials to concepts which were relatively new to them in the first place. And we linked them to kind of national policies, in particular the law with regard to the women's quota on 35% of women's participation, also in the customary courts and the like. And we showed them by working with the peace committees in an inclusive manner, inclusive of women, how this could look in practice. And I think this kind of exposure of, was kind of inspiring, also kind of showing how the implementation of a national policy, which could be rather abstract, works out very practically in their municipalities and the communities. And this is something that I would hope would stay as a kind of experience of personal level of the government officials which were involved in the ARC program. And I have to say that I never had the impression that we were like introducing something foreign or alien in the context, but that basically the knowledge that we brought was always very much also connected to what was anyway reflected in relevant national legislation and the like, and we only kind of facilitated that it was put in practice.
Yeah.
Clément, please go ahead if you'd like to add.
No, I wanted to say something, but just Messina's comment here, on the chat is quite, quite important, and I alluded to that. One of the weaknesses of the program, because we did not really address this social cohesion or peace building at the national level. And also, at Burundi, because it was just very complicated because of the shrinking civic space. So I remember sometimes we had a time, we're talking to Mofa and say, should we just pull out or should we do what? And then I was glad we had some adaptive programming that, the funder pushed for. We're like, okay, you can readapt your program to really meet the context in the ground. And then in this case, we're like, Burundian people need to reconcile. By the way, before even the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Burundi, people used to reconcile in their own ways. So we had to follow the community structure mechanism, to reinforce the existing ones of how people they need to reconcile. And because at the beginning we wanted to link our program to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and we saw that I hope I'm talking to in a safer space. It was more corrupt. The mandate has changed. It was so complicated. So to reinforce the national structure such as TRC was really also a betrayal to a victim in the community. So we redirected on more community-led reconciliation and the peace building, because there was no space really to act at that national level. And thanks to the funder who understood the adaptive programming, and they pushed for us to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Clément. I think, what Messina has touched upon is also a question that remains with MFA as well, is and one I've alluded to in the beginning, is how can we recognize the value of these local peace building efforts, and and still have some way to connect them to the national level. I want to invite you maybe from some final reflections on how maybe a recommendation to us as a donor, how we can still make that link and have realistic ambitions and really recognize the value of these programs within our policy, within our results framework, and with the way we structure programs. To you both.
Okay, we get another big question in an interesting forum. So let me try to collect my thoughts here. So speaking for South Sudan and just looking also where the national peace process stands, or basically where it has stalled since 4 years. For me, at a personal level, the question is really, what does our peace building efforts, what do they mean for the individual persons in very specific places? And what I can say on basis of having worked remotely for the ARC program for a number of years is that it makes for individual communities a huge difference, whether there is such a program in place or whether there's just nothing at all. There are national level dynamics at play in South Sudan, which are huge and which even significant regional actors, I think, fail to influence in an adequate manner to resolve it and to move forward with the peace process. So what does this mean for the people of South Sudan, who are in the meantime basically left in limbo, but still have to live their lives? So this question of linking it up to the national level, it is a valid one, and I think that there is a really relevant role, for example, on strengthening these state-level structures, such as the State-Level Peace and Reconciliation Commission, who has the mandate also from the government side, and who is basically lacking resources to fulfill that mandate in this linking pin function. But at the same time, the relevance of community-based, community-focused peace building is evident for me simply because of any conflict that happens at household level, at community level, can escalate very quickly in the very resource deprived context that we are talking about. And so any child which is not abducted, any life which is not lost because of these very community focused efforts is one. And this makes for me the relevance of this program. Thank you.
Yes. I think you have, Cornelia, you have touched it a lot. At the personal level, I was involved in this program for almost the past 5 years. Really, the beauty of the whole issue, the whole so I mean, at the national level, we did not really do much, but I think we proud ourselves with the results we left in the communities. For example, in Chibitoke, one of the areas that is really troublesome, close to Congo, when you get young people really planting mushrooms and making from €0 to 400 euros as a profit for someone who had nothing. That's very important. I will also echo one of the administrator in a commune called Mugongomanga, just in Bujumbura Rural, somewhere up the mountain. He said to us, I remember we were there with some visitors. He said, these young people that you are working with today, I used to run away from them 2 years ago because they used to linger in the community and they were the one who were to bring trouble. That's the troublesome. But from now, I'm using them as my advisor. Imagine a young person who did not even have a voice. Now the local authorities coming to him and say, so, I mean, what can we do? And as I said in my presentation, the majority were enforcing tax, the communal tax payment. And I remember, the evaluator of the program was like, are we not really reinforcing this government that is very tough on civic space? Why are we reinforcing the tax collection? And they were like, but I'm a citizen of this community. I mean, I need to make sure that we pay the tax. I mean, I need to reinforce the tax. So young people, community members at least took pride in what they have, the asset that they have, and the asset is themselves first. and also the peace among them was the asset. For me, that was, I mean, a take home and the pride in such a, such a program. Of course, we need to look at the next level. How are we going to influence the national level in terms of peace and the reconciliation and cohesion? Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, both. I think it's due to time. It's time to close off. I'll close with with some final lessons or takeaways that I've collected this session. And I think the one thing that stood out to me most is the diverse range of drivers of success, which I think for us, it strengthens the idea of a holistic view at peace building, not only focusing on formal processes, but really this comprehensive view of where to find success for peace building and where to support. So, and then the second takeaway is I think something, Cornelia, you've also said, is this how there can be a huge difference at individual level, which it sort of affirms that social cohesion can take place at all levels and not just at country level or society wide. And I think it also calls for a more comprehensive view of where to find social cohesion and where to find successes and ways to strengthen. Michelle has shared a Mentimeter for some final thoughts, so I invite you to fill it out. And yeah, I think we're over time. It's been the session we're meant to close off. So I want to thank you all again for joining, for listening, and I hope the session has been fruitful for everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cornelia. Thank you, Piemont, for sharing your insights, and thank you to the audience for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your interest. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.